that's going to be very, very high voltage.
If a panel starts to output half of what it should, how are you going to know?
It's not like a no-brainer, really. So today we're going to talk about the panels that are damaged, scratched, slightly dented, or even mismatched. And we want to see if they'll still produce power, having scratches on them, being damaged, being shattered, how the performance compares to a normal panel, and also, does the angle of the panel make a difference in its performance? And the only way to do that is using microinverters. Microinverters are small inverters that attach to the back of the panel and allows you to monitor individual panels and individual performances of the panel rather than having it as just one whole figure, which I'm going to show you. I'm going to go on the app and show a live demonstration of the panels and compare them. Another thing we're going to show you here is the panel mismatch. So again, we've got various panels. We've got a commercial panel here, which is like 620 watt peak. And then we got like your standard panels that are 420, 425. They're different manufacturers, different cells. Some of them are dual glass. Some of them are just like all black. So we're just going to go through the app in a bit and just see the difference of generation of these panels using microinverters. Another thing we can monitor with individual monitoring is the partial shading. For example, on this flat roof, being winter time, sun being quite lower, we can see these back panels are getting slightly shaded. The front section is getting covered by the back of the panels at the front. So therefore it will drop in performance, but there's no way of knowing how much the performance drops if you don't have microinverters, if you can't monitor individual panels. It's key to have these microinverters. For example, if this panel's got producing 20% less than the panel at the front, on a string inverter, that 20% will apply to that panel at the front as well. But with microinverters, that panel at the front can just go at its maximum generation, and this one can go at with that 20% drop and not affecting each other. So Tom, we talked about the efficiency and the great monitoring that Enphase gives and how much control it gives to the end user in terms of just knowing how much each panel generates. So obviously the monitoring and the efficiency is amazing, but what are the key features do you think Enphase has over its competitors?
Well, I think what Enphase prides itself on is safety, and safety really is at the heart of everything which Enphase develops and builds upon. So the way it compares to a traditional system is we've got microinverters behind each panel. As a result, the conversion between DC and AC is done on the roof at panel level. That means the maximum amount of DC which we can actually get in the system is the amount that panel can produce by itself. So quite often 36, 40 volts, as opposed to it getting to hundreds or even thousands of volts. To put it in context, you might easily get 600 volts on a traditional system, and that's the equivalent of what you would get on the underground, at the London Underground.
I mean, these panels here, we've got about 18 panels here. That's going to be very, very high voltage. Even if you split it to 2 strings, you're still looking at, 400 volts.
Exactly, and it adds up quite quickly. What we're doing then, we're mitigating the risks associated with that, primarily fire, where you get DC arc fault. As well as that, it's a much safer system. If somebody ever cables to get damaged, it's the same as what you get in your house, the standard electrics which you get in the house. If there's a fault or a cable gets damaged, it's just going to trip the circuit breaker and then disconnect it. We have something built into the microinverters called rapid shutdown. What that means is if there is no power feeding up to the microinverters, there will then be no power feeding down. So if you isolate at the circuit breaker or your consumer unit, that means the whole system is completely dead and safe to touch.
Yeah, because if there was a string inverter and God forbid there was a fire, there's no way of isolating those panels, is there? If you have just a standard system on the roof.
So, yeah, even if you isolate to the isolator, it's still live as long as it's daylight. These are solar panels, they're going to continue to produce and push down, so it'll be live up to that isolator. However, with us, they shut it down at the module, so then there's nothing pushing down into that.
So is there any added value to having Enphase on commercial buildings?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're seeing increased demand from installers, but as well as that, insurance companies who appreciate there is a slight increased risk when it comes to a DC system. And as a result, they're stipulating that it has to have certain features where a solar system is considered for commercial premises, whether that be AC architecture, which everything within it is AC, or rapid shutdown. Again, Enphase has that in the sense of it shuts down if the system is isolated. So definitely where insurance companies are involved, it would either potentially increase premiums if a system like Enphase is not used, or they might say altogether that they can't have a solar system unless it has this technology in place.
Yeah, because obviously safety is super important. And yeah, and what about like reliability? Because obviously, imagine if you've got 100 panels on the roof, there's restricted access. How often do they need to be replaced? Is there a maintenance on them? How reliable are they?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because that really is a key benefit to Enphase. Again, we class it as a fit and forget system. We want somebody to do an investment, and it is an investment when you buy solar. It can be quite significant. And you want that investment to be for the lifetime of the system. You don't want to have to then spend money in the future. Our reliability is one of the best out there. We have 0.05% failure rate, and we're actually one of a few manufacturers that do publish that failure rate. As a result, we back it with a 25-year warranty. So again, that matches the warranty of what you would expect from a panel. Like I say, once your system's installed, you fit it, you forget it, and it's going to last the lifetime. We've even had independent reviews of the reliability of the system, and they've said that actually it's more like 45 years that these microinverters are going to continue to run for. I think as well, we start talking about 100 panels, you start talking about commercial systems. The concern is if a panel, for instance, starts to output half of what it should, how are you going to know unless you have that level of monitoring? So even where there are failures, whether that be panel or even though it's extremely rare, microinverters, you're going to know exactly where it is, and it just gives a better monitoring for the customer who's purchasing that.
Yeah, because obviously we install a lot of string inverters as well, but you know, when you look at how much control people have with Enphase, how much more efficient their system is, how much more reliable it is, how much safer it is, it's kind of really like a no-brainer really. You think everyone should go for Enphase. It's just because it's not just one or two reasons, there's just so many reasons that investment is more secure, and it's just more beneficial for the end user in terms of cost. So it's really like a no-brainer in terms of going for Enphase. So hopefully we can just get the message out there and give people more control over their system, and just make their systems safer and more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. And I see it as it is an investment, and you're going to get your return of investment over time. And ultimately, I would say with Enphase, it's risk-free. You're future-proofing yourself for 25 years. You know that your system's going to work. It's the safest system out there. It's going to produce the maximum amount that your system can produce, as you touched on earlier. And again, you've got that 25-year warranty, which is backed with that. So yeah, in my eyes, it's the best investment you can make in solar.
So on the app, you can see the entire array. So what I was saying about earlier, if you go on the app, you've got the layout of the panels, and you can see how much each panel is exactly producing, any issues that could cause a drop in performance. So for example, these two panels here, that one is completely shattered, and if you compare that to the exact same panel next to it, which is not shattered, it's producing roughly about 40 watts less. So you can see it's still producing despite having the massive damage on it, but obviously it's not as good as the panel that is kind of like undamaged, if you like. So you can see the difference in performance. But again, going back to what we said about efficiency, if these are all in series on the string inverter, that panel on the right will also be producing 88. It will drop in performance, same as that. So it's not dragging the rest of the panels down with it.
Exactly. Right. And like you say, I think you can see a massive disparity between everything you got here, between different panel sizes, different manufacturers, different angles. You can see mismatch of how much each one is outputting, and like you mentioned, you can optimize capturing all of that as opposed to it bringing down everything, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's really great. And I think that's a really good example you've got up the top here, where those back panels have been shaded in the morning due to the low sun in the winter. We've got shade on that. However, these front ones haven't. So we're seeing a significant difference in production just till this point in the day from the front panels to the back panels.
Exactly, and the shading is it's almost 3 times more, isn't it? So it's like, although it's not a massive bit of shading, you can see how much shading will affect solar panels in general. So on a string inverter, all the performance of these 6 would be so much lower, where you're not losing that efficiency with microinverters.
Yeah, you'll be governed by the weakest link. So in this case, 68 watts is what everything there would produce if that was on the same string. However, now, as a result, I mean, these front ones are producing nearly 240 watts. So you're capturing that extra generation. Yeah,
and again, you just know where each panel is, how much it's producing, and just gives the end user so much control of having these microinverters rather than just one figure and not knowing where the problem is. But yeah, no, it's good to know that whether a panel is damaged or scratched, it's actually hardly affecting it in a way. Well, unless it's completely, really badly damaged, but the one next to that is scratched. but you can see that's producing same as a normal panel. So one tiny scratch is not going to affect your PV array system. So that's kind of good to know in a sense.